I didn't know any different either. So it got to the point where, I was scared enough that I confided into my parents with everything that was going on they didn't know.
Each one of us has a story. It's being written in moments of both joy and pain, in life's triumphs and its tragedies. It holds the power to inspire, to deliver hope, to bring change, but only if we will use the power of a voice.
Thank you for being here, Jackie. I always say everybody has a story, and you have several interesting stories. So let's start when you were a little girl.
Ooh. Okay. My childhood was really interesting. I don't think I realized how interesting it was until later on reflecting back. But I grew up in Miami. And
At the beach.
No, not quite at the beach. I wish, but it would have been a different set of stories. And it was very predominantly Cuban. And so even my middle school was like 3,000 kids. It was huge, and 98% Cuban. So it was an interesting thing to be a minority at that time growing up. And where I was, it was infused with a lot of violence and gang violence. So it was
a happy childhood, honey.
Well, my family had a happy family childhood. So my family was really solid and strong and had a good moral compass for me. But it was an interesting time of life to be in this place where there was a lot of girl gang violence and we had a lot of stuff going on, like metal detectors to get into school and.
Way back when.
Way back when.
You're not that old, but
no,
way
I'm pretty old.
Back when.
This was an interesting, late 80s, and there was a lot of scary stuff going on for a kid,
and for a kid, what was your take? Were you afraid to go to school?
Yes, and I didn't know any different either. So it got to the point where. I was scared enough that I confided into my parents with everything that was going on they didn't know that was going on. My sister was in a different school. I have an older sister. And so and then we switched schools and moved to a different area, which was a whole different environment and a really cool, different kind of story. But that was looking back, there was a lot of growth that happened very young.
Self-confidence or good and bad?
I think good and bad. I think there was a lot of fear and a lot of turning inward, figuring out my own kind of direction and North Stars from a very young age, questioning things at a very young age, but a lot of fear that I had to overcome later in life when I left.
You left that school with fear?
I left that school with fear and walked into a different environment that
had no fear?
No, gosh, no. Still late 80s in Miami, the whole Pablo Escobar era, right? So there was it was Miami Vice. Yeah. It was pretty much Miami Vice. So I left to a smaller private school, which was a whole different environment, but it felt safe.
So from your childhood, you're observing.
Yeah.
And storing it in the back of your mind?
Yes, and kind of reflecting back on so many of the things that I was exposed to really young and what I took from that, where kind of it set me back and things that I've, learned through as an adult and how that helps me parent differently with my boys.
Okay, so do you recall your brain trigger when you have an event that is not so familiar to you?
Sometimes.
Or do you bury it?
Well, I buried it for a while. And then I think in the past probably 10 years, I've recalled a lot of things that I saw or experienced at that time in my life that I had buried.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this the reason you wrote this book?
Not at all.
Okay, forget it.
Yeah.
Tell me the story.
Of the book?
No, not the book.
Okay.
Yeah, but 10 years ago?
Yeah, I just started recalling things and feeling, I think, brave enough to look back on those experiences more with curiosity rather than with fear. And seeing them for, almost looking at myself as a little girl and what that experience meant to me, and almost validating the emotions that I had in those experiences instead of burying them, which is a lifelong journey for me, is like validating emotions. So I think it's been very healing to look back and talk to my family about it and my parents about them. And
Wow.
So it's been an important part of my adult life.
So what happened 10 years ago that triggered looking at inward?
I think, I don't know for sure, but what's aligned with it is, I have 2 boys, one who's 16 and one who's almost 13. And I think just being a mom and watching them grow up and the experiences they're having, and kind of thinking back to my own experiences at those ages or that they were coming into, just prompts you to reflect a little bit on your life and direction and thinking and what you want your kids to experience. And I think there's just a natural course for me with that.
Okay, so when you talk to your parents and you express that you're scared, do you have that same relationship with your kids? Was that one of your goals?
Yes.
In reflecting?
Yes. And I think my natural state, and always growing up as being a pleaser. And so I never wanted to disrupt things. I never shared things that could cause stress or be upsetting. I just wanted everybody to have a positive experience and a positive experience of me, more than almost concerned about my own experience of me. So that's something that has been a great learning, because nobody asked me to do that. That was something that I just did and took on. And because of that, I'm trying to parent in a different way of validating emotions. And it's okay if it's not a good experience. Like, we're here to support you and here to listen, and all feelings are valid. And trying to make sure that they don't unintentionally not share because of something inside.
Okay, so now let's go on to the book.
Yay.
Okay. What prompted you to write this book?
So I thought about it for about a decade.
10 years? 20 years?
Yeah, so I've been working in this space, coaching leaders and teams for a very long time. And I've had all of these tools in my head and things that I work with teams and leaders, but I didn't have a real process behind it, or something that people could do if they weren't working directly with me. So it really was, a twofold approach. One was, I wanted people to be able to experience the work without having to be a direct client. And I needed to get it out of my head and organize these things into a process that could be replicated.
Let's back up.
Okay.
Your schooling. Where did you go to school?
I went to undergrad at Duke, and then I designed a master's at Harvard.
Smarty pants. Okay, now let's. A lot of money. Okay. Do you want to coach me one-on-one, or do you want me to read the book?
I'll do whatever you want.
Do you think it's more productive, more effective to train or coach the leader or the team? Bottom up or bottom down?
I'm very much top down. I generally, when I work with leaders and their teams, I never just work with a team without the leader. I fully believe in the cascade approach from top down. And, the first line and the last line of the book is, it begins with you. And this is a book for leaders. And it always begins with the leader. You set the tone, you set the energy, you set the outlook, you set the trust factor, you set all of this, and how we communicate and how people feel at work. And so I always coach the leaders. And then usually either they bring it to their team, or I work with the teams as well.
Is it hard for a leader to communicate to all the employees, all the teams?
Yes, and that's why I wrote the book. Relationships are so messy and dynamics are so complicated. And so my goal using, research and data and neuroscience is kind of my approach, and all positive psychology, that kind of data, is really to help simplify what's messy. Because as leaders in business, most people, 9 out of 10 actually, don't have the natural leadership skills. So 9 out of 10 don't naturally have it. 1 out of 10 does, and generally the average size of a team is 10 people. So if you pick one of them to be the leader, 90% of the time it's not someone who has the innate skill. So they just have to be trained. So you assume that people, if they're really good at their job...
Wait a second.
Yeah,
Can I get my son? Who's going to be the leader?
Yeah. And it's true because... most people get promoted because they're really good at their work. And then all of a sudden they're leading people. And that's a completely different skill set. And so I think there's this nuance. It sounds like a nuance, but it's actually a really big deal because you manage things and you lead people. And they're very different things to do and very different things to understand. So my focus is really on, you're a great manager. You're good at your things. But now let's teach you how to be good at the people side. Because to be successful as a leader and as you grow in your career, you have to understand the people side, because the higher you go, the more that's what you're doing. And other people are managing the work. So that's where I really focus.
Can you, to me,
Yeah.
what I hear,
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you how to engage with people.
Yeah, effectively and meaningfully. And, it starts with like the first shift that I always talk about is shifting from the golden rule to the platinum rule. And the golden rule is treat others as we wish to be treated. And in real life, like, who's to say that you want to be treated the way I want to be treated? And if you make a mistake, the way you want feedback is the way I want feedback. Or when you're having a tough morning, you want support the way I want support. Like, we know that doesn't really work. If anybody's ever been in a relationship with anyone, that's not really the case, right?
Anyone, yeah.
Anyone. So flipping to the platinum rule, which is treat others as they wish to be treated. And that's how you have meaningful and effective relationships. So then it's just flipping that, like, how do you want feedback? How do you need to be supported? What does help look like to you right now? How can I communicate this better to you, right? And even last night, it's funny, like, perfect timing for this conversation. My son Miles, last night before bed, he was feeling really distant with me. And I was asking him what was going on. And, this is 10, 12 hours ago. And he said, Mom, when I'm telling you what's wrong, you always try to fix it. And I just need you to listen to me. And that's why I'm not sharing things with you right now, because I feel like you're just going to fix it. And that's not what I need. I was like, thank you for telling me, right? So therein lies the platinum rule, right? My instinct is to fix it because that's what I want, but that's not what he needs. And so if you approach that with all relationships and in work with just that first step of switching to the platinum rule, and then there's all these ways to do that, that's the quickest mindset shift.
So how long does it take for an employee to tell the leader how to communicate?
Most times employees don't tell their leaders, and that's why it's up to the leader to ask these questions and to start kind of mining for this information. And there's all the guidelines in the book. You'll see at the end of every chapter, it has, an assessment for the leader and then next steps to do with your team to figure these things out.
Do you not have to go through the test?
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's even thinking for you, because you have to understand, well, what does that look like for me? How do I want to be treated? How do I prefer feedback? What makes me feel most valuable, right? What does a win look like for me? What is most frustrating for me? And so starting to think about that ourselves helps us define what it means for us before we even think about what it means for other people, right? Because that's where we default. That's our own lens.
The ego. So I want to talk to my employees, but my ego stands in my way. Typical or not typical? I'm right, you're right.
Yeah, I think there's the I'm right. I also think there's this feels soft. I don't have time for this. I get that a lot. From some leaders that are resistant. They think some of the people side of it are more softer skills. And in real world research, the people actually is what creates the profit, right? If the people are happy and you have people who are engaged, who stay, who feel valued, who trust their leader, their performance goes up and profits go up and shareholder money goes up. All of that thing is completely correlated. So your success actually comes through your team, not despite your team. And I think that's where we focus is sometimes people who are resistant, I'll throw out a stat, like 58% of people trust a complete stranger more than they trust their own boss. And yeah, that's the response I get. And it's like, okay, fine. Trust is important. How do we build trust? So sometimes just throwing out something that's really relevant, or when, I really focus on finding people's brilliance. What's that unique spark that keeps them fulfilled, where they find joy at work? And how do we get them to do more of that?
The leader or the team?
Both. Everything starts with the leader and then moves to the team. So even finding the leader's own spark and brilliance, and then for the leader to help their team members find that. And really leveraging that cognitive diversity on the team and that collective brilliance on the team. And so, when somebody's like, gosh, that sounds like a lot of time and people are hired to do their job. And then, stating something like, well, when a leader cultivates an environment where people spend more time doing what they love, they actually see a 72% lower turnover rate. Right now, that should matter to every leader in an organization.
Okay, but right now,
Yeah.
if I'm a smart employee, I'm maneuvering my boss because I know you need me.
Possibly. I think it depends on the size of the company and the type of the company and how much room you even have to change your responsibilities. So I think I believe it's not just the responsibility of the leader, but the privilege and opportunity of the leader to really mentor and grow and create an environment for their team members where they not just thrive, but they want to stay. They want to show up and feel like they're, it's bringing out the best and they're moving into their potential.
So I'm going to be selfish and use my real life example.
Great.
So I had a stroke 3 years ago. I'm embarrassed that I had the stroke and embarrassed that I don't speak correctly. How does that affect me with my relationship with my employees?
I think that's a brilliant question, and my instinct response to that is sharing what you just shared with me is what creates psychological safety on a team. That vulnerability of the leader to say what you just said is what creates that commitment, that loyalty, that trust from a team. When the leader is able to be vulnerable, the outcome of that is psychological safety, which is the number one factor for a high-performing team. And psychological safety is defined as the ability for someone to say, I messed up, or I don't know, or I'm challenging your opinion on this, or I'm sharing a new idea without the fear of shame or judgment. So that's the key part, is being able to do these things without the fear of shame or judgment.
The leader or the team or together?
The team members. And so so Google did this huge study called Project Aristotle. And what they did, because Aristotle's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So they decided to set out to figure out what is it that creates a high-performing team. And they studied, I think it was 180 of their teams with like 200 factors for like 2 years. What they assumed was going to be the case was it was going to be their superstars, right? Whoever had the most superstars was the high-performing team. Didn't even come in the top 5. The number one factor they found for a high-performing team was the level of psychological safety on the team, which was, that idea of sharing your mistakes, owning them, saying I messed up, saying I was wrong without fear of shame or judgment. Because the way I look at it, because I always frame into a positive psychology mindset, is yes, that vibe is there, and that's so important to create an energy on the team where people feel safe. And that's what encourages courage. Because when you have that, that's when you can raise your hand and take a risk, right? That's when you can share something that you're like, this might sound stupid, I'm going to hold back. But that's where innovation happens. That's where people take risks, and that's where true growth happens because you have this foundation of psychological safety. That's where you can encourage courage on a team.
Is it more likely that a man or a woman will share the vulnerability?
I don't know the research on that, but I think overall, from everything I've read and everything I've, knowing people, I think women tend to be more vulnerable in general. I think there are a lot of men who are and are very comfortable with it. And sometimes it's kind of getting stretchy out of your comfort zone a little bit. I think women naturally share more. In my experience, it's easier for women, and some women naturally do that anyway. But that vulnerability piece is so key in leadership.
So at the top, you've climbed your way to the top. You want to be protected. So my experience with women is quite the reverse.
Interesting.
Like, I'm in my throne. I earned it. Don't screw with me.
Yeah, I can see it going both ways. I work with a lot of women leaders. And so much of what we do through the work is really grounding yourself in your own authentic leadership. So staying true to your own values and your own core character strengths and what matters most to you. So you're not kind of leaning into maybe the culture of what the leadership says it's supposed to be or people who preceded you, but really who are you at your core, and how do you anchor yourself in that as you grow into the leader that you want to be that fits your own life and fulfillment.
That takes courage.
It takes a lot of courage, and people are so relieved when they do it. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, especially when their company's bringing me in to do that work. And they know, like, this is coming from the top, that it's almost like you get permission from the company, and then you have to give yourself permission, which is sometimes the hardest part, right? To truly be you in your leadership and have confidence in your own style and what's authentic to you. But that's where fulfillment happens, because it's exhausting trying to be something you're not.
How many people try to be something they're not?
Oh, I'd say the majority. Because you're moving up, especially when you start young and you've got this drive or ambition, you're just going, right? You're climbing the ladder, and you don't pause. You're just, the goalpost keeps moving. And then what I've seen is sometimes you get to the top of your ladder and you look around, you're like, oh, shoot, I don't like this view, right? What do I do now? And that's oftentimes when I'm brought in too. It's like these people, these leaders are like, I don't like where I am. And so it's really pausing and reflecting and course correcting and recalibrating of, what do I want this to look like for myself? Is this true for me? And being okay kind of with a squiggly path to make sure that it's the right one for you.
In essence, if the guy at the top who's looking, or the girl, at the top of the ladder and decides, this is me. Do you say that's not for you? Help them see that it's not for them?
Well, I think it's figuring out what part isn't for you. Sometimes it's perception. Sometimes there's something going on that needs to be unwound a little bit. But it's really kind of reflecting back, kind of breaking things apart, untangling it a bit, and seeing, is there a way to get more of what's truly you and more of what's fulfilling in what you have? Is there a way to move some things around, to take things off that are feeling kind of that dissonance, and just kind of like playing with it a little bit to see, how do we make this fit where you are? Or if not, especially if it's brought in from a company, I'm not going to say, yeah, quit your job. If it's a one-on-one executive client, we do reflect sometimes if they're really unhappy. Yeah. But oftentimes it's, from when you're looking from so far up, it's hard to tell what's what. And it's in our own lives. We see that all the time. Things feel too big, right? And you can't see through the forest, right? So sometimes having somebody guide you through with steps to look at and reflect on these things about what part is fulfilling, what part's not. And sometimes it's not super hard to fix by delegating some things, by doing more of certain things, by taking on a different, not necessarily a different role, but adding something to your role. Like, I have a client who was very unfulfilled and just felt like lost that spark. And we went through and figured out, like, where do you find that spark? And we did, calendar audits and these different exercises I have to kind of figure out what is most fulfilling. And they found that their time talking to people outside of their team and helping them solve problems was always what lit them up.
Was that client their expectation because they were at the top? I can solve it myself. Why can't I solve it?
Yes, and they just felt stuck. It was more of like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just not happy. Yeah. So it was part of it was being able to figure out, okay, well, they started a mentorship program internally in their company.
Nice.
And that was a way to start. And it was in addition to their job. They did their regular job. And their job became more fun because they also had this other part they were looking forward to of bringing these other people into the fold and mentoring and setting up mentor-mentee relationships internally. And it just was what lit them up.
Mentor, mentee in what area? In the emotional, family?
Oh, no, at work. So having kind of younger people or newer people in the organization matched with people who were more senior in the organization to set up these mentorships. And, if you have an internal mentor, you're actually 5 times more likely to get promoted. So this was a win-win all around.
You're filled with stats.
I have so many stats in my head. Yes, I love data.
Are they all in here?
There's so many in there. Yes. Yeah.
So what made you start this business? Like observing?
Partly, I think it goes back to that idea that I was always this pleaser. So I naturally was a little bit obsessed with how people act, react, and interact as a kid. So even like friends, like why did this land well? Yeah.
React, act.
And interact.
Okay.
Yep. And so just watching how, I sent this to this person and they were thrilled and this person didn't like just always watching and observing reactions and just always was able to help people find ways to see each other's point of view and kind of build those bridges between people. That was a natural possibly a coping skill and also something I really enjoyed. And so I studied, psychology in undergrad and then designed my master's in human development and psychology and interpersonal dynamics in graduate school, and then started writing personality tests. And so I wrote these 100 personality tests out of grad school, and they were entertainment based, but it was really funny. That you might have heard of this test because it circles around every so often. The what breed of dog are you? It circles around.
I know.
So it's like these fun little entertainment based tests. But it was funny because I wrote that test in January 2000, first one I wrote. And all of a sudden, this is before social media, right? People had to copy and paste a link into an email. And we all of a sudden got a call from the New York Times. We were like 7 kids in a basement in Cambridge, in Massachusetts. And we got this call. Howard Stern called. All of a sudden, these things. And it was the #1 clicked on link in the world. And it settled on 1 million clicks a day. Back in 2000. And we're like, why? Why are people wanting to take this, what breed, find out they're a pug? Why is this interesting to people? And so I wrote about 100 of these tests. We got moved out to San Francisco by a venture capital firm. And what I was learning at the time, and this does play into what you asked, was how people wanted new ways to share about themselves. And it was this idea of having a new way to think about yourself and having a new way to show it. So here's an avatar of me. Here's a new way to look at me. Here's a new word. Here's a new term. Here's me. People wanted to share this and how much people wanted to be known and seen and understood. So that was what really clicked for me at that time, is how amazing it felt to find ways that were positive and efficient for people to learn new ways to understand themselves and each other.
I have to ask, what kind of dog do you want to be?
I know. Well, I was a golden retriever.
Oh, pleaser, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the positive. So that's when that kind of started for me. And then I started a, kind of coaching consulting business for relationships and how to have more meaningful and effective relationships, and moved into teams and then started working with the leaders and just kind of evolved from there.
I'm amazed. So how many clients can you have at once? So I'm not a reader. Should I read this?
Well, there's an audiobook. Are you a listener?
Yes.
That might be easier. Yeah. I did the audio too.
Did you enjoy that? The audio? Reading your own?
It was interesting. It was, I was resistant, but I did it, and I actually enjoyed the process more than I thought.
So why did you resist?
I think the idea, it felt...
the leader.
Yeah. Well, I'm a work in progress too. It was this idea. It made, there's a whole chapter on getting stretchy, which is like how to take risks in a place that doesn't throw you too out of your comfort zone, which kind of the sweet spot in your brain where you're still learning but getting stretchy without being in a fear state where you don't actually learn from the risk. It was really stretchy for me because it felt more like a performance. Reading the stories and, being the characters in the stories, I was like, oh, that's not me. I'm the teacher. I'm the thought person behind this. So I had a lot of people, different actresses read the book and read parts of the book, and I would listen and I'd be like, oh, that's not right. And my publisher kept saying, it's because it has to be you. And so I was like, no, let's listen to more voices. Listen. And finally I was like, fine. And it was actually fun.
Did you have have a different take on this book when you read it out loud?
No, what I decided was I'm going to read it like I'm talking to a friend.
Before and now, are you happy like that?
Yes. Yeah, I am.
You want to read it to me?
Sure. Well, you can listen to audiobook, and I did. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So what comes next?
It's really cool. The book came out March 22nd, and it's been a really exciting launch period, and it's done better than my wildest dreams. So I'm thrilled. So right now I'm doing a lot of keynotes, a lot of conferences, a lot of, speaking engagements and retreats and stuff like that. So it's really opened up, a bigger opportunity to share the message.
And the wildest dream now is?
I'm figuring that out. Figuring that out. Building a good team is where I'm heading next, is other people to help implement the work while I kind of share the message on a larger scale.
Can it be taught?
Can it be taught? Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's part of the intention of writing the book. Mm-hmm. So someone else can do it too.
So how do we get this book? How do we get the audio? And how do we employ your services?
So the book, easiest place is Amazon.
Okay.
Right? And it's in every format, and Kindle and everything, Audible. You can get the audiobook. It's all related to
options, Lori.
Yeah.
Options.
Yeah. Options. Got all of them covered. Platinum rule, right? Everybody does it their own way. And I'm just Jackie at sparkbrilliance.com.
And you are a very fascinating lady.
Thank you.
What do you want your legacy to be?
This feels really bold to say, but I really want to create a movement around people shifting out of the negative spaces where we're just trying to get back to neutral, trying to get back to normal, like heal what's broken and fix what's wrong, and really just push into this whole positive side of life where our brilliance lies and where our potential lives. And there's something I would just love to share. There's something that feels really powerful. There's a whole concept called emotional contagion. And that means that our emotions and our outlook spread. And it's actually 33 milliseconds that our brain will read and identify someone else's emotions and instantly take it on. And when you're a leader, not only does it go to the level below you, but the level below them, people you don't even see.
Okay. You have to say that one more time.
Okay. So in 33 milliseconds, our brain, not faster than that.
Okay.
Our brain will read somebody's emotions or outlook and instantly take it on. Which means somebody walks into a room in a bad mood, what do you feel? Right? You feel it. You feel your mood drop. Somebody walks in a great mood. You feel that too. And we have this power by this emotional contagion to decide what energy, what emotion, what outlook we want to spread to the people we care about.
So if you're grumpy and I'm happy and you walk into my office grumpy, I can change you?
It's whoever's really stronger in the emotion.
Huh?
Right? Their studies show put 3 complete strangers in a room for 2 minutes. Whoever has the strongest emotion will spread it to the other 2, good or bad.
Emotion or personality?
Emotion, like good or bad mood, right? Anyone who's had a teenager knows what that feels like, right? You're in a good mood. They walk in after school and you just like feel that energy come in the house. You're like, oh no. The idea is we have this power to spread, like be that first domino, right? To spread this positivity, change the tide of what's been going on, right? There's so much negativity. There's so much sitting in that, the negative side of that number line. And not only do I believe, but it's proven by neuroscience that we can change that. And we just have to choose and be intentional about how do we want to show up. And we can change the tide of this. We can change and move into a more positive space for ourselves and all the people around us.
So I'm a hugger. Can I just hug people that I perceive are in shitty moods?
Well, back to the platinum rule. It depends on if they want to be hugged. But spreading something positive, sharing a smile, sharing a funny story, that changes moods. Right? If you're in a bad mood and somebody walks in and they're like, oh my gosh, I have this funny thing that happened this morning. I want to share this with you. It lightens things up, right? Like the Ted Lasso type of leader, right?
So I recently was told that I had the stroke because I had to listen. And my girlfriend said, and I thought, oh, I'm a good listener. But my girlfriend said, maybe you don't listen to what comes out of your mouth.
Oh, interesting.
So the presentation, the style, do you coach on that?
Oh, yeah. There's a whole chapter on that. Actually about even how to listen to understand versus listening to respond.
Yeah.
And communication is half about listening and half about what you say, but it's really about you want what you say to be received. It's not about how you want to say it. It's about how the other person needs to receive it.
That takes a lot of calculating.
For a bit, and then it becomes a mindset shift. And all of these things that you'll see in the book, they really build on each other. Each one builds to the next. And it tells you this is what to do before you read the next chapter and try. And whether you're the leader of a business or you're the leader of, a community service thing or leader of your family or just the leader of your life, you can implement with anybody.
Tell me about Jackie, the woman, the mother, the businesswoman. How do you do it all?
I'm like, right? like most of us working moms, sometimes great and sometimes not so great. I think I just try to give it 100% of where I am that day. And sometimes that's awesome and sometimes it's not awesome. It's a lot. It's hard. And I just try not to drop too many balls. I try not to drop the balls that have to do with my kids. Mm-hmm. I try to take my own advice that I would give somebody else, which is, a lot harder to talk to yourself than it is to see so clearly with other people. It's a juggle, and sometimes it feels, like I'm on fire with it, and sometimes I have some really hard days where I feel like I'm not doing anything great. But overall, I believe in my heart. I have a complete passion for what I do, and I feel so fortunate to do what I love and get to my work. Okay. I love it. I'm always mom first. Mm-hmm. My kids will always be my first priority, and Rob, my husband.
Him too.
Him too. Love him too. I've got three boys, and an enormous dog. But I think it's really hard. But I'm fortunate that I get to do what I love, and I think it's setting a good example for my boys too, to see a woman working hard and loving what she does.
Do you ever allow your client, your husband, your boys to see you struggle? Because you're such a pleaser. I can tell by your smile. But
yes, I've gotten a lot better at that. It's been hard to ask for help, but I'm getting much better at asking for help, and I feel very fortunate to have a husband who wants to help and really steps up and is so supportive of me and my work and where I'm going with it, that I feel like I have a really strong scaffold, which I count my blessings for. I know that's not everybody has that, and I feel really lucky.
Are your boys going to go into the same career?
I highly doubt it. No. I'm still trying to get them to read the book.
Hey, they can listen to it with me.
True. Yeah, there you go. They'll come to camp.
Thank you. And tell me the biggest hurdle you have had. We all have hurdles through life, but
Yeah, and I just learned like the idea of like little T traumas versus big T traumas, and the difference.
your husband taught you that.
Yes, he did. And I just learned that. So, I think probably the hardest thing I've ever dealt with was when Simon, my older son, was born, and he was born very sick, and he had a medical condition, malrotated intestine, and he there was a good chance he wasn't going to make it. And so he had major surgery at 4 days old. And I fell apart. I didn't know how to cope with that. I felt like all my resources, I'd used up all my reserves. And I really feel like I hit rock bottom out of fear. And he was my first son. And it was very traumatic and, in intensive care for a long time, and just kind of waiting to see how he was going to be. And that was a terrifying experience. He's great. He's healthy. He's a healthy, thriving 16-year-old, and it has nothing to do with where he is now. It's fully resolved, but it's something that really rocked me to my core.
Scarred you.
Oh, yeah. It did. And that was a time where it really, I think, hit me about asking for help, needing help for the first time, where I had no reserves left to pull from on my own to get through it. There was no place to bury something anymore, just really raw. And, calling on family and friends because I couldn't do it myself.
And how do your perception of having another child after that experience, was that tough?
It was really scary. It was really scary. And, I had a difficult pregnancy, and there were some health scares for our second son, Miles, as well, throughout the pregnancy, where, there appeared to be some chromosomal defects that were going to be happening for him, and those tests were incorrect. We found out after he was born. But it was scary. All of it was frightening, and it really just it makes you really raw as a human, and brings you back to these emotions that, for me, I don't like to go to, but I didn't have a choice. And so sitting in that space where you couldn't just fix it and solve it and, reframe things was a really hard time, and I think a very sobering lesson.
As a mother, I know you'll never forget, but do you close the door on that, or how do you process that through your life?
I think counting my blessings and being so grateful. I'm a person who defaults to gratitude a lot. I'm a very grateful person. I practice gratitude a lot. I have my kids practice gratitude every night with Rob and I. And
how do you do that?
We've done this since Simon, our older one, was 2, and we don't miss a night. And he's 16. Every night, the 4 of us get together, and usually our dog, and we each, including our dog, because she has a voice in our house, we each say 3 things we're grateful for from the day. And that's how we end our day every night. And if somebody's traveling, we text it in or FaceTime in, but we all share 3 gratefuls every night. And no matter what's going on, usually nighttime's stressful for a lot of families, and it's like, it's too late and we didn't do this, and that kind of stress and chaos at night. And this is the way we end our day, and we reflect on the positive things. We learn different things about each other's days and that we didn't know before, and it's a beautiful way that we end every day to kind of cap it with some these things we're grateful for.
Does it take the anxiety of the day just out of it?
Yes. It helps so much, and it's proven to help with anxiety. Gratitude practice. You can't have gratitude and fear at the same time. They can't coexist. You can toggle kind of between them, but they can't happen at the same time. So when you sit down and move into a place of gratitude, the anxiety or fear temporarily just goes away. And the more you practice that, the more you build that muscle.
Can we do it in the morning?
You can do it. You can do it anytime. Anytime of day is good for you. Okay. Yeah.
You'd go first.
Okay. Well, I'm super grateful that I learned about where you got your dress. They don't have to always be profound, right?
Touche.
Yes. I'm really grateful that that we're about to have a really nice family weekend and have everybody together. And I'm grateful that I'm sitting here with you today having a really meaningful conversation.
Thank you.
What are yours?
I'm grateful that I'm meeting you because I just want more of you. I'm grateful to have help, to be beginning to learn to ask for help. And I'm grateful because I'm going to be Oprah.
There you go. Yay. And now I can say I've been on Oprah. Win-win.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.